Hello, welcome to the Endgame. Today's topic is games and improving one's health with games. Take it away, Psych.
Awesome. Thanks, Pika
All
PD.
right. Thanks, Pika Petey.
Yeah, cool. Well, we're here with Kim and Bernard and Popopo.
Hello.
Yeah, really excited to have you guys on the show. And just for a little background, basically, I met Kim at Yale when I came to visit, and I was interviewing people, and I learned about the app that you guys have built, and what it's doing. I think it's really important topic. So we're kind of going to be talking about in general how games can be used to improve people's health, but also specifically about one app that I think is very important. And you'll talk more about this, but do you guys know I want to do a quick poll, thumbs up and thumbs down. Have you guys heard of the Juul vape before? And do you guys know what that is? So in the emoji, you can do thumbs up if you know, thumbs down if not. Okay. Yeah, so and I'm sure you can explain the Juul better than me, but it's just an e-cigarette that has a huge concentration of nicotine, and what you guys built is an app to potentially, and it's spreading in middle schools too, so it's really easy to use. It looks like a USB thumb drive. There's not much cloud produced, things like that, and you guys have built an app basically, and virtual reality application for the Oculus Go that tries to help middle schoolers be able to resist the Juul and things like that. So could you maybe, if you guys introduce yourselves and kind of give a little bit background on that?
What we're doing? Yeah, sure. So hi everyone, and thank you so much for being here and this opportunity. This is really awesome. This is the first time I've ever done anything like this in VR, even though we spent the last year, developing a game in VR. This is the first time I've actually done anything in a social VR situation. So this is really cool.
Welcome.
Yay.
Yeah, so thank you so much for being here. Oh, cool! Look at that. Anyway, my name is Kim Hefia. I am a research scientist. Oh, look, I love this. I work at a research lab at Yale. I'm director actually of the Play for Real lab at Yale, and we're centered in the Yale Center for Health and Learning Games. So about the last 9 years, almost a whole decade now, I've been developing and evaluating games for the focus of behavior change or health promotion or health prevention. And we focus mostly on young teens, because that's really, kind of where we hope to make the change, because kids usually we want to try to get to them before they're starting making poor decisions around drugs and alcohol and maybe unprotected sex. A lot of those kind of risky behaviors. So we're trying to get to them early. And about it, let's see, last summer, Oculus Education approached us and asked us if we were interested in developing a game for health prevention around vaping, with a focus on young teens. So we were really excited to do that. As far as we knew, there was nothing that existed yet like this. So it was a really cool opportunity to try to create something that hadn't been done before in terms of behavior change, because behavior change is hard. And we've done this in games, 2D games. We've developed several 2D games, but nothing in VR. So Bernard here from Francois from Preview Labs, and I'll let him introduce himself. But we partnered with Preview Labs and his company, and together we've spent the last year developing a video game using VR around vaping prevention, specifically on Juul, because that's what those crazy teens are using right now. But Bernard, if you want to introduce yourself too, and full disclosure, this is my husband. Just so you know, I should say that too.
So I'm Bernard from Preview Labs. So we're actually a company that's focused on rapid prototyping with game technology. So I started this in 2010, so 8 years ago. So doing all kinds of prototypes, like basically clients come to us with a certain vision, a certain idea, and we turn that into a first prototype so they can try out the concept and they can use it to validate it, see if it works, change it a little bit, or present it to, for example, potential investors or publishers. So that's basically what we do. Having started the company in 2010, which is also the year in which, if I'm not mistaken, Angry Birds was released. So a lot of game companies were looking at mobile, and they wanted to try something in mobile and figure out touchscreen interface. So that's how we did initially a lot of mobile prototypes. And then with VR since 2014, and now like the majority of what we do is with VR and AR as well. So it's like people come to us and they say, okay, we want to figure this out. How can we achieve this, or how can we achieve that? And that's how we work. And also since 2011, we've been working with Yale on a range of different projects. We've worked on for different universities as well, because for research it's also like, it's almost like prototyping, where you run a prototype in order to test the concept and to get it in front of an audience and to get to some findings to do your research. So that's basically what we do. And then since after a few years of starting of having established preview labs, I noticed that we get a lot of clients from the US. So I'm originally from Belgium, and so I started traveling a lot to the US and also going to the Game Developers Conference every year, and that's how we met.
Yes, yes, we met there, and then one year, and then we got engaged at the Game Developers
Conference.
Like GDC? Really, yes,
oh my God.
Yes,
GDC. That's like this is like our jam. GDC. That's amazing.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. So yes,
that's great.
Yeah, we met there one year, and then we started dating the second year, and then got engaged the third year. So GDC.
So,
yeah, but anyway, yeah. So do you want me to talk a bit about what's unique, I think, about our game that maybe
so
these guys might find interest?
Yeah, so two things. One, if you guys have questions or thoughts, once we get into the background a little bit again, you can line up in the center and, form a line or whatever if you have anything to say, or if there's no one there, just stand in the center if you have something to say. I feel like there's two kind of maybe threads that are very interesting about this. There's one is the specific situation with the Juul, how it affects middle schoolers, how this app might be helping them, what are the kinds of things that they're seeing. And then the other is how you actually went about the process, and especially it's fascinating to hear you describe the prototyping process. So how you actually, what was the process of actually getting to the point where you have an app and a product? Yeah. So whichever thread you guys want to start with, but I think those are two interesting ones. Maybe we can explore a little bit.
Yeah, it's actually, I think when Oculus approached us, we were open to ideas on what game to create, and I think actually we decided to go with vaping just because at the time it was just starting to become a problem in schools. And who would have known like a year later that like Juul specifically, but vaping is a huge problem with schools. But the problem, I mean, vaping in itself is a lot less, it's not quite as harmful, obviously, as smoking cigarettes. But what kids don't get is that those tiny little pods are
for the Juul
that are in Juuls, the liquid that's used in e-cigarettes is actually packed with nicotine and a lot of other chemicals and stuff that are known to cause all kinds of cancers and diseases. But the real problem is the nicotine. So when you have like 14 and 15-year-olds think that they're just vaping because it's cool and it's fun and everybody else is doing it, they think it's harmless, but they don't realize that what's happening is they're becoming addicted to nicotine in the process, like immediately. One of those little tiny pods is the equivalent of a pack of cigarettes, and kids can finish that off within a few days to a week. So kids aren't realizing that they're becoming addicted to nicotine.
So with this game, what's its focus? Is it focused on like providing them that information and the scope and the context that they're lacking?
Part of it, yeah. So what we found, we did the research and did some surveys with kids, and we found that they really just don't know the danger. They really don't understand that they think it's harmless, that it's just water vapor, there's not nicotine, that they can't get addicted. So part of it was educating them about that, but it was also trying to create a space where they could practice refusing peers. So because what we found is that like kids are vaping in the back of classrooms, they're vaping in bathrooms, it's everywhere at parties. So we try to set up these situations where we could put kids in them and then have them using voice recognition that they could actually practice these skills with teens. So we have all of that embedded in the game, and then also with the knowledge that they gain, they actually have to use that with their teachers and their peers and stuff to kind of either shut them down or correct them.
Can you like walk us through like what a game session is kind of like?
Sure. So I mean, it actually feels like a full-on game. It's about an hour and 15 minutes, hour and a half, Bernard, to get through it.
Yeah, something like that.
It's about, yeah, and it's a story. So it's a kid. He's a freshman in high school, and there's a party that he wants to get to that night, and he's pretty much just got health class to get, you know, Sean, who's the cool senior that's throwing the party. He's got to get an invite for him and his friends to that party, and he wants to get to the party because there's the cute girl that he likes that he's, you know, scared to talk to. It's the whole story, you know, behind it. But along the way, he's faced with these challenges, like the kid in the back of the health class is trying to get him to take a hit, and he's trying to even understand what the language means, and he's trying to understand how he can say no but still seem cool, because that's what kids are kind of worried about, like, you know. And if you ask kids, they don't really want to say no to vaping because everyone's doing it and it's cool, but we you know, so it's trying to help them find ways. We've done this will be the fourth tobacco prevention video game that we created. So it's based on over the last 7 or 8 years. So we've done a lot of research around refusing and practicing skills in games. So we really wanted to try to give them a situation where they could practice. And they do it using voice recognition. And Bernard can talk more about that, about how the creation. Yeah.
I am curious about that. Does it recognize like what they say?
More or less. So the whole idea is that it's kind of like you have dialogues that you go through. So it's not like you can just say anything and it will respond to anything you say. No, it's kind of like in classic games or RPGs where you like Skyrim or whatever, where you're in a conversation and you can choose between different options. But of course, if you would just be able to choose between different options, you could actually not read the content and just click through it, and then there's no value, or people can just skip everything, and that's what we wanted to avoid. So what we're doing is we're actually detecting that they're speaking, and that they're speaking a specific option, so that you can choose between different options in the dialogue system, and then you have to actually say it for the text to fill up and to continue to the next. It's instead of like just clicking it, you actually have to say it.
So there's like a confidence level that you have in terms of how likely it is that each response is the actual option or whatnot.
So it's not like super accurate, because one of the things we wanted to do is we want to make sure that it works offline, and that we're not necessarily paying for a cloud-based solution like Google Voice or where you have to start paying after a while. So we use a more simple voice recognition system. So it's not like super advanced, but if people are just playing and they don't know how the system works, they can just say the sentence and it's gonna make them proceed in the game.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting. And Pika?
Go ahead.
Yeah. Hi. I was just actually wondering about the educational game system, what you have on like the data collection of the effectiveness of your game. Like, is it actually effective, or are you going to potentially run into a dare situation where, you know, they go to school and they tell kids don't do drugs, drugs are bad, but all the kids here are drugs. So like, what is your data collection based on like behaviors in the game? Is there a follow-up outside of the game to see if it is effective? What kind of like control and studies that have you done like with using your game itself?
Right. Yeah. So this is just a pilot study. So we were only funded for a pilot study. So we've enrolled about 40 kids so far, and we've collected pre and post data on them. So around knowledge and attitudes and beliefs and intentions. We're not going to be able to follow them since it's a pilot. We're not going to be able to follow them, you know, past the post game. But the goal is to get. the goal is to with this pilot study kind of really look at the efficacy and look at the feasibility, and then do a larger pilot with a control and something that we could follow, so we can actually look at behaviors. So these are more, these are the mediators of behavior that we know influence behaviors. And we'll have that data here, and we're going to be at Oculus Connect next week, and then we're going to be at XRDC to present in October, and we'll have that data to present then. So, and it looks really promising, but I can't say too much yet. But yeah,
Okay.
and we have incorporated a lot of like theory in terms of. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, because I'm always interested in like young kids using VR, because I honestly truly believe that VR is the next platform for the next generation to latch onto, just like how my generation latched onto user-generated content online, which we took YouTube up to like a full-fledged medium. I think the next generation is going to take VR content up to that same platform. So I'm always interested in data sets that actually involve the next generation and how like effective they are in utilizing the tools and how effective it is with that generation. Because you're forming your emotional core at the time. And so if they form it around that technology, they're just like, they're hooked in.
Yeah.
Thank you, Pika. I actually are kind of on that note. So this VR game scenario is kind of a new platform for experimenting with these type of efforts to educate younger people. But I'm sure that you took some information from previous previous attempts at this. What were your like strongest models, or like what was the kind of largest set of information you had about what is effective and what isn't effective when it comes to this?
A lot of it was really, for me, Bernard probably had his ideas going in. I think for me, I looked more towards what we knew in 2D games that worked well, and then trying to expand on that. Like the idea of practicing skills in games, fantastic, but the VR opens this whole other thing of where you can practice something and get reaction, like you're in an environment and your experience is much more experiential than if you're on a 2D game or in front of a computer screen or a tablet or a phone. So we just kind of wanted to take what we knew with the research and push it further. And then Bernard had some ideas of his own just from his experience. So I had my ideas from the research on it, and then he came in with his ideas, like the voice recognition and a lot of other ideas. Do you have anything specific?
Yeah, maybe. Well, since this is a game about peer pressure, and it's not about like walking around I would say a mistake that a lot of serious game developers initially make is that, oh yeah, let's make a game world, and they think about maybe World of Warcraft or whatever, where you can like walk around and do things, but that's not core to the experience. So you have to think about, okay, what is it about? It's about peer pressure, it's about talking, so we narrowed it down pretty quickly to like more something dialogue based, which actually is pretty close to the work Kim also did in the past. But at the same time, it's VR, so we just drew from our experience so far working on different VR experiences. So it's not about like walking around. You don't actually move. You can just look around. We also use the Oculus Go, which is really awesome because it's pretty accessible. It's relatively cheap and at the same time pretty high end. Compared to like Google Cardboard.
It's interesting too, because I think that it's also because I built a social anxiety. I think some of you guys did the social anxiety experiment that I built, Cyclab VR, maybe like Catapult or I can't remember. It was like my first year.
It was the Vive one, right? I wasn't.
Yeah, it was for the Vive. But it had a situation interaction paradigm where we use like the perception neuron, full body tracking to record a pre-recorded MP3, and then we had someone read from a script and kind of were seeing what their chosen interpretations of three options were, like a positive, negative, or neutral. But I like this. I think it's interesting what you guys have built into it, which is voice recognition, because you can really, eventually, like right now, you're matching the voice to 3 predetermined responses, but you could imagine a situation where you build an algorithm that's able to actually just create a dynamic range of responses from the agent, which actually Skip Rizzo has built something like this that reads your face, and Ellie, it's like a virtual therapist that is in VR and then reads your face basically and responds, and kind of you have a dynamic conversation with it. It seems like you guys can shift towards that eventually, which for research would be so great.
Right. And I think one of the things that kind of sticks out too is this idea when we think about learning, when we read something, we retain some of it, right? And if somebody's talking to us, we retain some of it. But if we actually have something and we speak it and we use it and we put it in a situation that is relevant to us, then we're more likely to remember it. So that was really kind of the basis of this game. So if somebody's learning something about vaping that they didn't know before, we're not just telling them, we're forcing them to take that information and use it to either correct a friend or a peer or somebody that doesn't, quite get it, or to answer somebody when they ask them a question. So they're actually verbally having to say it and use the knowledge. And so we're more likely to remember knowledge as opposed to if we're just clicking on buttons, or somebody's speaking at us. So that was really kind of a lot of the learning idea behind it.
Can I ask what the strategy is? Because I mean, I don't remember very well, but I vaguely know about middle school age that like social anxiety is just a constant, and like the opinion of one's peers is of paramount importance, especially in this like isolated school environment where the only thing that your major parameters are the opinions of your friends. How, like, what's the I guess what's the approach to convincing them that saying no to the people whose opinions that they value is of higher priority than accepting that behavior?
Right. Yeah, and then there were a few things we did. We worked really hard. I think this is something we still need to work on, but working on the audio part to create some sort of sense of pressure. So not only are you feeling the pressure from your friends, what they're saying, but you're feeling it in the environment. We also place the character in their head, so there's a constant internal dialogue. So they're having to walk through the things that their friends are saying. It's like, so somebody says something, you have to stop and think about it. Like, what are they really saying to me? How can I say no in a way that they're not going to be mad at me, or I can make a joke about it, or I can try to change the subject? So we try to give them a lot of ways to say no, or to think of something different. And so that they're still they're getting out of a situation they don't want to be in, but they're not necessarily, that just say no idea that does not work. We never, we just didn't want that. We wanted it to feel more like what it's really like. And we have
there's like a lot of humor, and there's a lot of humor in the story. So it's not like, and it's also virtual. So I think I would assume that teenagers can practice without having to worry too much about on the social side. The humor makes it also easier, and also in the beginning you're not just saying straight and effectively no. It's like you're and this is one of the interesting aspects about the game. Like you have these different powers. You have the power of observation, and I don't know by heart the other names, but you have like the power of understanding. So it's about in the beginning you play through the story and you actually don't know what to say, and so you can only choose from like pretty clumsy responses, and you get funny answers, and then it's kind of, okay, now let's try it again, and it's kind of like a Groundhog Day effect where the game restarts to the beginning of the story. You're back in the hallway before the class starts, and then you have the power of observation, so you can observe things around you. And this follows basically like 4 different powers that are unlocked in 4 different playthroughs, and these actually
unlocking
correspond
skills.
They correspond to actual 4 skills.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow, that's so it's so cool. Yeah.
Well, we want
Sorry, I'm just geeking out.
Did you have another comment?
Yes, I had another comment. Okay, so you talked about like social anxiety. So your game, do the users get to create their own avatar, or do they as a character?
They play as a character. His name's Mike. Yes.
Okay, his name is Mike. Do you feel that if your students could create like their own look-alike character, would that be more effective? Or, do you think that would add to the experience? Or what do you think the benefit of having your users create their own character? Is that you know, like what
Yeah.
would be the
I personally
benefit?
think it doesn't really matter as much because it's a first person experience. So you don't
Yeah.
really see your own body. You would have to have a mirror. Uh, but extending on that idea, I think that maybe it could help if people around you are actual people from your school. If you could maybe customize the other
Oh.
characters, or that could
Well, that
be
would be
maybe
weird.
be something, but that would be a lot of
Oh.
Yeah,
work.
and it,
Oh.
Having to
it is
customize
true.
everybody.
And it is your own voice, so it does feel like you are taking on the characters. So I think because this was a prototype, we were limited because we first thought about a male version and a female version, or so because you have to go to the bathroom, you have to follow somebody to the bathroom because they're vaping, and so it kind of set up this strange social situation where, if you're a girl, could you follow Sean to the bathroom, right?
Yeah,
And
that
so
might
we
be
had
kind
to
of
really
dissonant.
yeah, just because, yeah, the way our the way our school systems are. So we had to kind of make a few choices there. But
Mhm.
again, this is a prototype, and it was just kind of a. But I think research does show if you can, the more
Yeah.
connected you are to your character, the more impactful the game experience will be. So I think it's a
Yeah.
phenomenal idea for the future. Yeah.
And that's why I'm a 3D. I mean, a lot of you guys know that I'm a 3D scanner myself. So that's in VR chat I noticed. But I do notice an increase in immersion and presence and stuff. But it's not as much. I think overall, like if this type of intervention
I
is
don't
going
know,
to have
man.
an
I kind of like
effect.
this thing. This is pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, you can be anything you want. But if the intervention does have an effect overall, I think that the most of the attribution to the power of the what's causing the change is going to be to the environment and the experience versus the marginal increase you would get. But actually, I think a significant increase of changing your own avatar and having a mirror and being able to see. I actually would predict that would be more impactful than changing the peers, just because you feel like you're actually with strangers, which can still be peers, can be strangers in schools. But maybe if you had your whole school scanned and all that kind of stuff, I mean, who knows what
Yeah.
the well, also on Endgame, we also talk about like the future and things and like where we think society's heading and all those kinds of things. So that's why we also kind of, I don't know, project into the what were you
I
saying,
think it.
Flo?
Yeah.
Oh, it just seems so powerful that the voice recognition thing, like the
Yeah.
fact that you have to progress the game by practicing social behaviors. Just because I know that personally, like the only way I become more confident in a social behavior is by actually doing it, and so it seems like a good way to like kind of hook into that. Like do a little bit of a brain hack, I guess, to like
Yeah.
because if you simulate an experience closely enough, it's emotionally the same as experiencing it, not simulated. So that seems pretty cool.
And it's going to come up more easily if you've already practiced and said it a few times. So it's like
Yeah.
it will kind of come more naturally. As long as you don't start calling yourself Mike.
So
Okay.
can you guys talk about the focus groups? Like how did you understand the life of a teenager, and also how did you end up on the Jewel
Yeah.
as your kind of focus of your intervention?
Yeah, it's kind of an approach we take to all of our games. Is the very first thing we do is we go to our audience. So and we've done this even with first graders. We created a math game for first graders, and we went and did focus groups. I kid you not, with first graders. So we always go to our groups. We also live with the teenagers, which helps. Who likes to tell us a lot about what's going. She's 17 now. She was 16 at the time last year, but yeah, she would answer all the questions there were about Jewel, and her high school particularly was all over the news. It's been on NPR and CNBC and CNN.
For
It's been
this
everywhere.
reason?
For this reason, yes, they have such a
Oh.
problem with Jewel. So we talked to, we had a really good spot to really talk to teens. But yeah, they told us really quick, like, kids don't say e-cigarettes. They don't even say vaping. They say Juul or Juuling, they say rip or hit, like just getting it all of it right.
What about the other
Having
side?
them.
When they how they going outside, the taking a
How they,
breath of fresh air.
oh, yeah. just all the things that they would say. Yeah, we had to make that sound real. And then the stories they said, and like, learning that it happens in the back of the classroom. Like, I had no idea. Like, even when we talked to teachers too at the schools, and even they didn't even have an idea. But the teachers were like, oh my God, everybody's doing it in the bathroom and in the classrooms. And, and we did surveys too. And we found out like 85% of the kids that we'd surveyed were juuling or had juuled before. So it was something we just we had no idea.
But how much percent were currently juuling versus how much percent just had tried it? How many people were currently doing it repeatedly?
I would have to look back, but I just remember the 85% just really sticking out that they had
exposure to the nicotine.
Yeah. So
interesting.
Somebody wants to ask a question.
Yeah, Rose.
Yes.
Hi. So, hearing all this stuff, like, I think you said 85% of kids were juuling? Was that what was said?
Yeah, the group,
Or
the
before.
kids that we,
kids
that we had surveyed. Yeah,
that
the group that
was
we had
so,
surveyed.
Right, that was so interesting to me. And all this talk about how this is what's like cool and popular and all that. And just a few years ago when I was in high school, not that long ago, I remember the smokers were the outcasts, and they were very ashamed of what they were doing, and they were not happy with themselves or happy that they were smoking, and people actively avoided them even in the popularity and social stigma area that is high school. It was the exact opposite of everything that I had been raised up being shown in like middle school and elementary school about how the popular kids would be like, hey, it's cool to take a drag, and absolute opposite. And then it shocks me to hear that kids are now back on the it's popular train with juuling and e-cigarettes and vaping. Do you think that there's any reason why we've gone from cigarettes being popular to being something people get shamed for to now e-cigarettes and Juuls are what's popular? And do you think it'll move on to people who use those being shamed as well?
Yeah, I think one of the problems that we're seeing is that the FDA doesn't regulate e-cigarettes right now, right? So we've almost gone back to 20, 30 years where tobacco companies can market towards teens and have all the candy flavors, like all the mango flavored and cotton candy, all that's not for adults. That's marketed towards teens. And if you and there's no regulations on that right now. So they tobacco companies and companies that are selling e-cigarettes, they really are targeting teens, even if they say they're not, because there aren't the regulations there. So there isn't that message yet. I think like on a larger picture of that vaping isn't good for you, because everybody knows just from all the ads, like the ones where they're talking through this with the stoma and they're missing half their face from smoking. What's the ad campaign? I can't think of the ad campaign.
Yeah,
the truth campaign.
The truth,
right?
yeah. So that actually those kind of kids think of that now when you talk to them about cigarettes, but we just don't have that campaign yet. Like, kids can see they can see commercials and ads and everything for e-cigarettes, and they can go in, and it's really targeting at them right now.
It's just
speaking of advertisements, actually very recently, about 2 days ago, I had my radio on in the car and I was listening to an advertisement. Well, not really an advertisement, more like a public service announcement kind of thing from the Juul company, stating that it's very unhappy and disappointed that people who aren't getting over smoking are using their product, and that their product was meant for getting rid of addictions to things like tobacco. Which,
it's interesting.
Then again, like you said, there's some dishonesty going on, and so I'm wondering if that was just a publicity stunt.
Yeah, I think there's evidence. I think if you think about the evidence for Juuls being the concentration of nicotine, if they were trying to help people quit, they would sell pods in degrading concentrations of nicotine. It'd be very easy to slowly wean yourself off. I think that's complete BS, and that it's just another manifestation of the capitalistic society that we live in, of a company needing to increase its profits and the rate of growth that it has. And so they're finding a new way to circumvent all the stuff. Catapult, yeah, did you have a response?
Regarding that, that's coming full circle because late 50s and pretty much all the 60s, cigarette companies would have their ads with a doctor on there. It's good for you and all that. Hey, it's all about the flavor. Brand this tastes better than brand that, and so on and so forth. Now they're doing it with e-cigarettes. Cigarette companies, obviously, a long time ago, they're not allowed to advertise on TV. They're not allowed to sponsor sports teams. They're not allowed to do diddly do squat, basically, nowadays.
Yeah, that's a great point. Also, I see we've had some new people join us. Just to fill you guys in, we're talking about this is Kim and Bernard, and they've built an app to try to help middle schoolers who are targeted by Juul, or it's spread a lot with Juul vaping, and they're trying to help prevent or practice refusal skills. And if you have questions, just line up exactly like you guys are, or comments or anything, and we can just kind of hear what you guys have to say. So, but Roosevelt and saying, so that was very interesting.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Lavaka?
Yeah, I was wondering, with the FDA starting to launch investigations into Juul's marketing campaign and the FDA starting to do things about that, I was wondering how you feel about that.
It's a first step. That's what we need. It has to. It's going to be I think it's going to be a slow process, just like it was with, I think, cigarettes and getting all of that, getting to where we are now. It's going to take a while, but it has to happen. Yeah, it has to.
So with having sort of already done this before with cigarettes and having seen that play out over 30 or 40 years, do you think that'll encourage this whole vaping thing to, shorten in how much time it takes for us to be like, maybe we shouldn't do this exactly how we do it right now?
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping, that we've kind of already know how to get there to where cigarettes, kind of the social norm is that cigarettes are not, it's not cool to smoke cigarettes in school. So we just kind of got to get there the same way, and hopefully it'll just be a lot faster, especially if we have the FDA behind us, and it just takes a lot.
Well, I can imagine there might also be factors that will make it actually harder because it doesn't smell so bad. It doesn't get in your clothes. Well, I guess it's easier to develop a stigma around smoking cigarettes.
Something that's unpleasant.
Yeah.
So it's like we don't really bother other people with it. It's also very hidden. So that makes it maybe a little harder. But yeah.
And nicotine salts, from my understanding, were specifically designed to bypass some of the mechanisms of nicotine delivery that typically cause irritation and things like that. And so your body is not reacted or defensive to the absorption of it or something. Like when you take the hit and you get a much higher hit of the nicotine, which is about, I think one hit is equal to one cigarette worth of nicotine approximately. And then the other question too, and this is a really good point that you're bringing up, and another question too is, what are the chances, these are, we talk about pathways and circuitry in the brain that facilitate addiction and increase people's chances of becoming addicted. So let's say there's these 85% of teenagers who try to Juul, let's say 15% of them end up getting prescribed an opioid for some kind of injury. Does this increase other secondary effects that increase their chance of getting addicted to opioids after they've been learned that kind of process of being habituated to a substance? So that's a huge concern that I feel like, we don't know, but longitudinally you'll be able to follow that population as well, I guess, too.
Right, and that's something that we touch on in the game, is that when you smoke when you use nicotine when you're a kid, you're more likely to use other tobacco products. Within a year, you're more likely to be using other tobacco products, but you're also more likely to be using other drugs, and you're going to have a faster addiction to them. So it's something simple. They think it's simple like nicotine, but it actually, their brains are just not developed yet and can't really handle handle that like adults can.
And do you think, one other question, follow up on that is, do you think that compared to marijuana, that doesn't have the same like addictive effects, or the physiological experience of marijuana having withdrawals or having to smoke again? If you compare, because I think I've heard some people when I've talked about this say, oh, well, that's just how they say marijuana is a gateway drug and things like that. But this is a little bit different, it sounds like, because it's really getting them in high doses of a repeated substance that they're addicted to.
Yeah,
Do
it's
you
the
think there's a
addiction.
difference? Okay.
I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure, but I would assume that there would be a difference. Yeah, because it's the addiction to the nicotine.
Yeah, that process.
Lavaka, did you have?
Yeah, sorry, but I had one more question.
Yeah.
You said your game was exiting the prototype phase. If you were to bring it, well, to market, quote unquote, had you thought about possible distribution methods so you avoided some of the preachiness that made Dare so unsuccessful in the 90s?
Yeah. Yeah, well, I don't, the way that I see it is that it's a tool, it's a platform for teaching. I would love to see, we already had, like, my daughter's school district has already reached out and asked if they can get it in all of their schools. But again, it's the access to Oculus Go that, is going to be kind of the hurdle there. But I see it as something that maybe in health class is going to be much more fun for kids to use and learn than having a teacher kind
VR
of
in
talk
health
at
class?
them.
Oh my god, that would be so much fun.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't
have way more fun than like putting on a video or something. You get to step inside the game. Like that seems like much better.
It's interactive as opposed to passive, and
it's personal. It's private and anonymous and personal. That's a huge thing that you can really, I mean, think about like sex ed, for example. I mean, like, how awkward is it, and things like that, teaching safe sex and things like that. I mean, obviously, I think a lot of people, when they hear, I know, that's what, when people think about this, they're like, oh, porn and VR, but like, you can have virtual bananas and condoms in VR just as they, have in real life or whatever too.
Like it being in a classroom setting is kind of tricky though, right? Because VR is a very solitary experience. Like you don't, I don't feel comfortable if someone else is in the same room with me when I'm in VR, and so it seems like it's also
be in a different room, I think. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
It's not conducive. That's a good point.
Right, and that's something that we're learning as we're doing this. We had to take kids out and spread them all down the hallway, so they're not close enough to each other. And then you always have the kids that are passing by and like to scare each other, and so it's just kids, and so it'll take some work, I think.
That is also a challenge of the voice recognition. If they're too close to each other, it tends to be a problem that it picks up on what other people say. So that's not really something we already considered or something like. I mean, this is the first version. We're experimenting with this. Yeah.
And also, that's a really good point, Evan. I see you're there, and I just want to make one comment about this too. Is that in the future, I think we will see in schools smaller rooms designed to have kids go in for educational experiences, whether it's science or health or anything like that. I think that could be a kind of future. We trend towards building those spaces. But yeah, Evan, what? Any thoughts, questions?
All right, so this I really like what you guys are doing here, and is there like a way to see any updates, like a social media or something like that? That's my first question.
Where can we learn more about your project?
Yeah, we're the Play for Real Lab, so we're at Play 4, like the number 4 and the letter R Lab, so play4rlab.org. Or you can also look up Play for Real Lab. You can Google that way, but it's play4rlab.org. And we're also on Twitter and Facebook. And then Preview Labs.
It's also previewlabs.com.
Okay, and we can put links when we finish off this live stream we're doing. We can put links in the description to get access to your guys' sites too.
On our Twitter, Endgame VR, we've linked to their Twitters in a reply. If you look at their episode tweet, we replied to that tweet with links to their stuff as well. But yeah, we'll put it in the description. Yes, we can give it to you on the Discord as well. Yeah.
And my second question is how many scenarios is it going to go through so it's more relatable? I gave into vaping once by a sibling, and so I'm just wondering so it'd be more relatable.
You're gonna put
That's
in
a,
other.
yeah, no, that's a good point. I think that's one of those things with a prototype. We were limited to what we could do, so we chose a school setting. But we do realize that a lot of kids talk about their first experiences with older siblings or cousins or even parents, because parents
Wow.
don't see it as a problem. I think it's safer than cigarettes, so they're like, "Oh, I'd rather you'd use this." So,
Oh man.
But
yeah,
Use it early. Yeah.
so in terms of the game, we have well, a few different environments and these different playthroughs where like the day restarts. So you start in like a hallway, having a small conversation with like two of your friends, and also various things around you to observe. Then you go into the classroom. It's actually a health class, so that's how we actually convey part of the messaging or part of the information about vaping through the teacher character. And then after that, if you can go to the bathroom, um, like where you see they've been vaping and such, and then you go back and it restarts. So by doing this Groundhog Day thing where the day restarts, we make well optimal use of actually 4 different scenes that we have. Like in the very last scene, you're able to like actually properly defend yourself against the peer pressure, and then you get into the party. So that's kind of what it looks like scenario-wise.
So I'm curious too. You guys are in the prototype phase of the game. Like, what are the next steps? Where is it going after this?
well,
So
we'd hope to get more funding, yeah, to
Okay.
to build it out, and the goal is to get it on the Oculus Store so that it's available for the people that can use it, teachers and kids, and after school programs. So
Right. Cool.
yeah, and there's more things to experiment with. Like, I mean, obviously, like extending story and more environments and maybe a female and male character, but also maybe tweaking the voice recognition further, working with maybe different services or maybe things we didn't talk about yet. But yeah, there are many other options maybe to make distribution easier or yeah.
Or in the news lately, there's been talk about Juul that's been used for smoking marijuana. People are putting liquid forms marijuana in e-cigarettes, and that's becoming a problem with teens. So
combining the nicotine and the marijuana or whatever.
Yes, yeah.
Wow,
and
that's like, 'cause
so
that's, oh my God. Yeah. And that's, by the way, PAX, just to let people know, PAX, the company who started out making marijuana vapes, created Juul, and then I think a cigarette company bought Juul, or they sold it to a cigarette company as well. So that's also, but so cool. Yeah, so we have some.
Okay, to take it back a little bit to when you guys were talking about how like the VR experience is a very personal experience. I see some good possibilities for schools getting sets of Oculus Go that students can borrow as for like your school assignment is you borrow the headset and then your assignment is to go through the game and complete it. And you could theoretically take it home because a lot of schools nowadays have laptops and stuff that students can borrow from like the library and stuff like that. So the Oculus Go is a very good example of something in the upcoming years that a student could go to the library and theoretically borrow it for a day or two to complete the different scenarios.
A quest.
Yes.
Totally.
Yeah.
That sounds. That's a great idea.
That's an amazing
that's
idea.
awesome.
Yes.
Yeah,
All
Pika.
right. Hi, Pika.
Hi.
Hello.
Okay, I'm gonna play the devil's advocate here. All right. So we were talking about how because the topic is like VR and health, how to better your health. But also, do you also think that VR could actually enable bad behaviors? Because it is a solitary event. You could be alone, and it's, there's a lot of clubs in VR chat, and it could be a lot more fun if you're on something.
There's drinking, yeah, that's true.
But I
There's a
think even
drinking
if you
club and things like that.
even if you do the wrong thing or the unhealthy thing in let's say in a serious game, it can still be a learning opportunity to see like how things can go wrong. So I don't think it's necessarily a problem. I think it's actually good if you try wrong things also, and I mean wrong is there's no right and wrong, but I think, but I mean, like the way we incorporated the idea of yeah, making the wrong decision or trying to refuse in a silly or bad way, poor way, is that you only have those options in the beginning, and you actually make those mistakes, and you end up like pissing off
learning
your
to
friends.
walk away from a bad situation.
Yeah, but it's interesting because I think, Pico, what you're referring to is kind of, let's say in Stokel's idea of someone take home the VR headset and then they end up opening a different app and or use their web browser to watch porn or things like that they end up using it, and it ends up facilitating, like, especially, if they end up going into an environment that has drug-related promotion, and people are saying, "Oh yeah, we're all juuling right now. Like everyone, let's all virtually in a circle. Let's all do it at the same." I mean, there's then people come in and drink in VR chat as well. They go to a bar, like Owlboy, who's actually in line, also to make a point. He has the best. Yeah, and he has like the most popular room in VR chat, which is the Great Pug, which is an amazing bar that you guys should actually see.
The Great Pug.
What?
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
okay,
see,
but here's the thing.
The experiences can cause negative, consequences.
Okay, so let's be honest here. Like sometimes when some people that are they have VR gear, but they haven't been on VR chat. I'm just like, yo, listen, just take a few shots of brandy, get on VR chat, and you'll have a fun time. But anyways, beside the point, I also think like there's a other element of danger, and it also can be habit forming because you don't have to go anywhere after you're done binging, whatever. Like, because if you're out at a bar and you're like, oh, I can't have this certain number of shots or I can't drink it so much because I have to go home and I have to be responsible. But as with VR, you just like, oh, yo, I'm going to go home. I had fun hanging out with you guys. And then it's just like, yo. And then, that's all you need to it.
I mean, it's like I think in a lot of ways, like that's going to have to come down to what their home environment is like. Like, like how available is that sort of thing to a young person? How much do they want to try that, and like how much privacy are they given when it comes to the internet and VR content and by their parents, and like that for sure like is it's part of the contextual issue, but it's not VR related specifically. Like how much freedom and how willing they are to misbehave is a whole bunch of factors go into that.
Yeah, I think people can consume more. Yeah, sorry. What were you going to say?
Yeah, I think for an intervention like this, we could build something in that if they do it in class or they take it home, that it registers like whether it's being used or not. And then, well, the other question, I think you were talking about people being in VR and then vaping at home at the same time, or is that what you meant? Or are you talking about
it's like
vaping?
Not virtually vaping. It's just like almost like this printer keeps happening. Like you have the opposite effect, like the DARE situation where it's very preachy against drugs, and it just introduced kids to a whole other range of drugs they didn't even know about. I know it's very specific to just vaping, but I was just playing to the devil's advocate about how the downside effects of health with VR, like what are those possibilities, and how to potentially to navigate around them.
Yeah.
Right.
Balance
I would
another
say
issue.
a game, one of the first games that I worked on when I first came to Yale was a game around sexual risk reduction for like 11 to 14-year-olds. So we're teaching 11, 12, 13-year-olds about blowjobs and condoms and drugs and alcohol, but it was a good thing because we were also enrolling 13-year-old girls that were pregnant. So I mean, like these conversations have to start somewhere, and they're going to learn this stuff from their peers or from their older brothers or sisters, and so we should talk to them first before. So it's not like we're giving them information that they're not going to know at some point, but it's trying to helping them early.
Do I have to stand over there to say something, or can I just chip in?
If you have a quick comment, you can just jump in.
Quick comment, but we're approaching the end here. Do you have a quick comment?
We have Owlboy and
I just thinking like with parental controls, there's no reason that virtual reality has to be private from the parents who can mirror what the kids are seeing onto a monitor. The parents could be watching in the kitchen or something.
Right.
Oh, that's a great point.
Exactly.
That's part of the
use the technology to your advantage. Yeah.
And that's also sometimes necessary, like when, when a teacher needs to help out a kid, like, oh yeah, you have to press this or that. It's really hard if they have to like take over the VR headset, explain it, give it back. If they can just see it really helps. It's something we experimented with in different.
And the Go is building in streaming ability as well, and the Santa Cruz will probably have. Ghoster, you had a response, and then Owlboy, did you have a comment? I saw you with exclamation points.
Well, I want to actually comment on what Pika was saying of, drinking in VR. Specifically, I do drink a little bit, well, actually a lot in VR about every weekend or so. And one of the things I did want to say about that is, yes, it's actually just like going to a bar. You know your limit. And while it is a little bit more dangerous because some of us don't have anybody around, you realize that it's, you're still there to have fun. And yeah, it is, inhibiting your mental functions massively because you're able to drink a little bit more because you know exactly where your toilet is. You could just pass out on the ground, There's a lot more dangerous situations that you can get in. But after your first time of getting absolutely, wasted, you just don't do it anymore because in VR, especially in VR chat, you're supposed to be here to have the conversation, not to not have a conversation.
There's something to be said for personal responsibility, I think, and like ultimately that's the goal of this, right? It's not to control kids' behavior, it's for them to learn how to regulate their own behavior and make responsible decisions for themselves.
Yes, that's definitely the goal, but I think also that is definitely like what we hope that everyone is capable of. But I think the issue in Ghoster, you've experienced basically there's a combination of the environmental life stressors that you have in your life right now and genetic predisposition that you aren't at the level where you're uncontrollably drinking every single day. But what's possible and what's I think worrisome and risky and I think valid about what Pika was saying is that people with the genetic propensity or kind of predisposition to and environmental stressors to develop an addiction, it can be activated potentially more easily because of the virtual reality if the person doesn't have the tools that we're trying to teach to be able to regulate their own emotions and things like that. So that's kind of like the risks. But Owlboy, also you've been very patient.
Yes, please go ahead, Owlboy.
So I wanted to take it back a little bit closer to the technology and the educational game stuff. I imagine that VR is very distracting to the educational experience. I feel like, and probably the level of detail and the level of graphics and the fidelity and the amount of time and resources that can be put into the experience are very distracting for students too. Do you get that kind of feedback where students are like overwhelmed with the novelty of it and not really focused on being there in the place? Because we're all here and we're very comfortable with VR and VR chat and stuff like that and socializing with people. I think we might be a little, I don't know, desensitized. That's the word. Yeah. So is that a problem?
Well, I think it was more of an issue when we were thinking about designing the game, like how to create some sort of where it feels, you can look around, explore your environment, but it's still like linear because we want them to follow conversations and, and not get distracted. And I think we did a good job with that. The environments aren't too heavy and there isn't a lot you can interact with and the conversations are kind of guided, like your friend says hey and you look over and you talk to them and then your other friend starts talking, you have to look over here, and if you don't talk to them they're just waiting and there's really nothing you can do, right, but talk to them. So there is a lot but it's no different than maybe being in your own classroom and looking around and getting used to it and you're like, okay, I know what I see now, I can kind of move forward in the story. But do you have something? Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. I would also say that because it is VR, there are also arguments why it could be less distractive. So I'm not talking about any research or in terms of like what we've actually measured, but I'm just thinking like if you're in VR, you're closing yourself from the outside world. So you're actually very much focused and then maybe less distracted by what other kids in the same classroom are doing around you. You're
So-
just
so
focused
you guys-
on the experience, and you're totally out of the real world and into the virtual reality.
So it sounds like you guys feel that these experiences, like, it's totally valid for this to be someone's very first experience with any VR, and it's
Yeah.
going to still be effective.
Yes, and that's
So,
like
like,
my research.
It being their very
my research
first
has found that
experience, because I've demoed VR to tons of people, and I think a lot of us have,
It's a
and
good
it's very
point.
overwhelming.
Oh boy, don't you remember your first experience?
I do,
actually,
but
because-
I found it, like, I was very distracted by how it worked and all that. Maybe that's just my perspective.
It depends on the environment that you put the person in. Because and that's my research so far is actually focused on, we've done 100, at least with patients with addiction, we did 165 first time exposures to VR and interviewed 20 people, because I love the qualitative as well, like the focus group qualitative approach and things. And we interviewed 20 people, and they talked about how the VR was less distracting and it was more immersive, and that they could actually remember things from the virtual environment better than if I had been drawing, if we've been drawing on a whiteboard in real life versus drawing in the presentation room. And I was like, why is, and because you're raising a great point, and I think people would predict potentially that'd be, and actually in the cognitive literature, there's this theory called context maintenance retrieval. And so far, the cognitive literature has predicted they try to distract people from recall ability by shifting their context, and that's been the theory, and they found kind of no results. But potentially, VR is providing evidence that shifting context, if it's such a new context that you're not used to, and things like that, that the things that you learn in that context can actually be better retrieved in the future, just as we can visualize and imagine our first VR experience or think about it. That impact that's happening creates a more salient and maybe accessible memory, and we haven't proven that, but I think there's potential evidence.
Something to
Yeah,
keep in mind
I'd like
too
to add to
is,
it.
Okay, but something to keep in mind too is that, like, VR is going to be less and less of a novelty as time goes on,
Yeah,
and
that's
it's
a good
very
point.
likely that in 5 years this won't be their first exposure to VR.
Yeah,
I think.
yeah. So I don't
And
know. I find
also-
it fascinating because, like, I find it intuitive that VR is overwhelming to be, and then you have this objective right away, and it's not just you're playing around with it. And then the idea of it being like teenagers and them being, I don't know, teenagers, distracted and amused and all that. So anyway.
But sorry, Ghoster, what were you going to say?
I was gonna say more to the line of, so Psych, you're basically saying the novelty adds to the rememberability. So basically, because it's their first time and it's a new place, they will remember the lessons that are being taught better than if you were doing it in another environment. And maybe even Danger, if you could answer that real quick, or if you guys could answer that real quick. I don't remember their name.
Sorry, what's the question?
Would you say that the novelty would you say the novelty of VR helps the kids remember better what the lessons were if you've tested it?
Surely think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I also think it needs to be simple and user friendly and to the point. And that's also what we try to do. Like, so there's no, you don't have to move. You just look around. You use the pointer. You select things. It's pretty simple to use. But also, yeah, indeed. I mean, I guess it's almost obvious that if you have a first time experience of something, that it's more memorable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
or
Kim, what
I'm
were you gonna
thinking
say?
about not necessarily because it's VR, but maybe it's just because it's a memorable experience in and of itself. Like if any of us remember playing Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego, or some of the games that we played as kids, we remember them because they were memorable and they were good and they were fun. So,
God, I miss
maybe
that game.
maybe it's less about the VR and maybe more about we played this game about vaping, and I remember the story and I remember what I learned and maybe that, and the majority of them, I will say, yes, it was their very, very first experience with VR, but they embraced it and they were so excited about it, which made my job easier because
Interesting.
they were I'm going to teach you something that's a cool way to get it to them, and they like that.
Yeah, I think novelty is good. Sorry.
We've got to wrap it up as soon as you're done there.
Well, I was saying novelty. I think the novelty of like shifting them into the new environment, but also that sudden shift that occurs with VR seems to have effects on the person's mood that kind of puts them in this kind of state of awe, or even as they acclimate to the VR, that state of suddenly leaving wherever you are and going into the very concentrated environment might have, versus when you travel to go on vacation, you're kind of driving to the airport, getting on the plane, flying, and there's that time that passes by. But yeah, sorry, I know we have to wrap up. I see Catapult. Hey, Catapult, you had a thing. Yeah, do you want to kind of close us out with a kind of thought? You know,
it was just just a quick one. It's kind of like what they were saying. My guess would be if they get the funding to do more research and do follow-ups, would be that young children will be more susceptible to learning what the lesson is trying to be, whereas teenagers might be a little more rebellious towards it.
That's also possible.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. I think that about does it for us. Thanks everyone for coming to the show and participating in the discussion. Let's see.
Thank you for
security.
Yes, thank you for having us. Thank you so much.
Yes, this was really
All right.
cool.
Yes.
I'm glad you guys were
Let's
able
get
to
a
come in.
photo. So we get a group photo of everybody at the end of the show.
Yeah,
so come
you
on
guys
up.
come,
The
if you guys
security
come from
should
the
be
front,
off.
and then everyone's
Hopefully.
sitting on stage.
Yes. Okay. Good.
So just come to the front. Yep. All right. Yay. So what should we say on 3? Like quit smoking or something, or?
You go in the front. Here, you go in the front.
Vape Nation.
No.
No.
Wait, yeah, Kim, you have to get come up to the front. Come to the very front.
better?
No, come like right here, right
In front of Pikachu. In front of Pikachu.
Like right here. Yeah, there you go.
Sorry, how do you do it?
Yay.
Like VR for
Everybody do the peace sign.
Like this?
Yes.
Peace sign.
How do you make a peace sign?
It's one of the hand controls.
Wait, are you
and
Oculus Survive?
It's
are you Oculus
thumbs
Survive?
on the
I'm
thumbsticks.
Oculus.
You have to rest your thumbs on the thumbsticks.
Yeah, you just have to rest your just rest your thumb
Kevin, come on up.
Oh, I got it.
on the thumbstick.
Alrighty.
Yeah, you got your left hand here. Yeah, there you go.
Taking picture in 3, 2.
Wait, what are we saying?
VR for education.
Who's Juul?
Okay, VR for education.
No Juul.
Yeah, no Juul. Okay.
Oh God, yes, you're right. We are doing Vape Nation.
Alright, 3,
We're doing peace sign.
No Vape Nation.
No Juul.
Education.
Alright, cool.
Wow.
I just realized.
Thanks everyone for
Us
coming.
going
Thank you
like
guys
this
for
is
being on the
almost like
show.
Vape Nation.
The most exercise I've done all week.
Yeah.
I can't do a peace sign. My fingers are fused together. See, that's my peace sign.
Oh.
Well, yeah.
My fingers are fused.
Best of luck with the project, Tim.
Yeah, thank you so much.
We were going like this. You ended up going like this. That's Vape Nation.
So maybe
It's a lot of fun.
I just realized that. I'm like, oh my God, no.
Yes. What's your name? Your catapult.
Yeah, Jack.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure
My
it's
great.
whoever made it
Thank
found
you.
it online.
Nice to meet you.
Thanks, you guys.
Hey, Bernard, how you doing?
It was a good discussion. Thanks so much.
High five.
There's plenty of these things on my
I love that
social
outside
media
booth.
labs.
Yeah, that's where I think it's
It's cool.
It takes such a short
I just started.
How much
Yeah,
I love it.
Wait, this is your
Hey, thanks, Ghoster,
Yeah, that's his
No
pedestal.
problem.
for filming everything. Yeah, that was really
Yeah,
cool.
thanks,
That was
Ghoster.